Good morning to everyone. I see people are still joining, but I would like to start to get us going here this morning. Welcome. My name is Eileen Halbert. I am the Executive Director here with 2Life. And from the looks of the registration list, many people are very familiar to 2Life and have participated in the other programs that we've offered in this series for the Women's Health Conference. But today's a special day, and today we're going to focus on the topic of nutrition. And so we have a very exciting program and a lot of wonderful information. If you're hearing my voice, of course, you've probably received not only the link to today's program, but some materials as well. And Ms. Bosworth is going to cover some of the material that you have received or received links to. And so our presenter, Julie Bosworth, has a lot to offer and has spent her career helping people deal with making the most of their nutrition during treatment and post-treatment in a number of different areas. And I'm probably not saying that quite right, but she will expand on that piece of it. But I want to just get to some of the practical things for today. Thanking our sponsors, which are actually shown on the bottom of our screen, and also to thank the staff and the people who are putting this all together behind the scenes. There's several people. But as we go through the presentation, there is quite a lot of material to cover. And I just know there's going to be many questions. As we have done with past sessions, you are more than welcome to put your questions into the Q&A or the chat. I will monitor them as we go through the material and as Ms. Bosworth goes through the material, and then we will start to address them at the end through online questioning and so forth. So here we go. And I'd like to introduce, because I see Ms. Bosworth is with us. Julie Bosworth is an oncology nutritionist, registered and licensed dietitian and senior dietitian at Dana Farber Cancer Institute in Boston. Ms. Bosworth is trained and skilled in assessing, diagnosing, and treating dietary and nutritional problems. She received her Bachelor of Science in Nutritional Sciences from Cornell University and completed her dietetic internship at Brigham and Women's and Harvard. Dietetics is a medical specialty focused on the use of food and nutrition to promote health and manage disease, including cancer. Ms. Bosworth provides nutritional counseling and specializes in oncology and survivorship, gastrointestinal issues. I knew I was going to have a problem with that word today. Gastrointestinal issues, diabetes, weight loss, and healthy lifestyle. And so with that, I'm going to welcome you, Ms. Bosworth, and thank you for joining us today through the miracle of technology.
Thank you all for having me. That was a great introduction. And without further ado, I'd like to really get started because this is a huge topic. We could literally talk through breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and so many conversations with regards to nutrition are just that, around a dinner table, and everyone is the professional. And I think many of you who have been diagnosed with breast cancer or have been sitting side by side with people who have, you'll notice the number of people who chime in and give direction about what people should or should not be eating. That's the number of people who come to me and say, well, I've cut out dairy, or I've cut out all meat products, I've become vegan, is honestly frightening. And I always ask people, no, where did you come up with that? And what they do is they kind of stop and say, I don't know, I think someone told me to do that. So what I'd like to do is take the mystery out of this today and talk about life and wellness in general. One of my favorite things about my job is to talk about survivorship, not just from the sitting as a survivor myself of breast cancer, but also as somebody who I'd like to think has helped people over the years find an eating pattern that they can feel good about, not just for breast cancer, not just for cancer in general, but for all chronic disease states that include obesity, heart disease, and cancer prevention. So it's more what to do versus what not to do. So please I would love to know kind of the direction you'd all like to go in terms of this conversation. I would like to entertain a nice conversation at the end based on your questions. So please let me know through your questions what topics in this arena of survivorship, life, and wellness are most important to you. Thank you so much for having me today. To Life, I'm really impressed by the organization, and I'm looking forward to today's talk. This is a huge volume of information, and I have about 45 slides. I've also included a lot of handouts. And so what I'd like to do is just have everyone listen today. Everything that we talk about is going to be in the handouts for the most part. I also am happy to share my personal information at the end, and you can contact with me with any additional things that you'd like. So that's really kind of what we're looking at. This is the food environment that has brought us all to the point we are, with high cancer rates, lots of processed foods. And in the words of Michael Pollan, who's one of my favorite food journalists, this environment kind of began back in the 70s, when all of a sudden we were dealing with a lot of packaged foods, things in crinkly wrappers. It's one of those things that it's easy. We all do it. We all are in a situation where we have to reach for something that's easy and processed. But we've really gone off the deep end with this. And I think everyone can kind of think, yep, I've had those moments. I've packed a lunch like this. So this is really what we're dealing with. Additionally, this is the American plate that most people value. We go to a restaurant. Is the restaurant good? Have I gotten my money's worth? Usually people, most Americans, and I would say often people in the 35 to 40-year-old to 75 age group, will feel they got their money's worth when they get a large piece of protein on their plate. So we're typically looking, when people come to me, they're looking at a plate that's pretty much half meat, often red meat. People want that big ticket item. And this is honestly what has gotten us all into a lot of trouble. Whether it's been, so I'm sure those of you who have Googled, cancer risk, you'll know that glandular cancers like breast, ovarian, pancreatic, and colorectal all respond pretty heavily to an animal-based diet, an animal protein-based diet. So when we see a diet that's very heavy in animal products and processed products, we know that there's a prevalence toward diagnosis of those types of cancers. Therefore, we can flip it and empower you to say, and when we eat more of a plant-based diet, and that will be the theme throughout today, what can I do? You can eat a plant-based diet. So that is going to be one of the common themes throughout the day. And you're going to also see in your packet that you have the plant-based diet handout with 2 different ways to ramp up to the plant-based diet, kind of the jump start and then a kind of a slower introduction. Personally, I'll throw my husband under the bus. We all have to do the slower introduction here because he's one of these people who would view this as the typical American plate. And this is what he's going to value. Okay, so one of my favorite places to go for nutrition information outside of the Farber, at the Dana Farber, we have about 200 written educational materials between the dietitians at both Dana Farber and Brigham and Women's Hospital, which is whom we're affiliated. We also have the Zachem Center for Comprehensive and Integrative Therapies. And that's where we develop all of our survivorship and research information. But the American Institute of Cancer Research is a really great non-center-based arena for where they have conducted over 7,000 research studies on the link between basically lifestyle and cancer that includes diet, exercise, and for the first time, cancer survivorship risk. That www.aicr.org provides a comprehensive global report. And the last one of 10 recommendations is specific to survivors. I find this website to be incredibly helpful. For example, I saw one question pop up about caffeine in the chat already. So about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, California stated that caffeine was a carcinogen. So we all were kind of taken aback, wondering where the information was coming from. Within 2 weeks, AICR.org came up with a position statement on caffeine. So if you're trying to figure out how to address all the bombardment of information that you're getting, AICR.org is a great place to go if you don't have affiliation or can't reach a dietitian. Next slide, please. So we can look at this, and this is one of my favorite slides because it really talks about, we can really never separate out the, if we could just go back one. Other direction. Was a.
Hold on one second, please.
Thank you.
I'm not using this part of the presentation. I apologize.
No, that's okay.
Which one? I'm sorry, Julie, which one did you want?
It's the grid of, it's blue with the grid of four quadrants, please.
I apologize. It's giving me trouble.
That's okay. I'm going to just keep talking. So, if you saw the slide when it was up there, it's really talking about how we really can't separate eating and diet out from all of the other things that we would recommend with regards to a healthy lifestyle. You know, one thing, you know, leads to the next. So when we talk about breast cancer survivorship, we also talk about exercise, getting 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week to significantly decrease estrogen levels. So especially in a hormone-driven environment for breast cancer, exercise can be really helpful in decreasing estrogen and feeding the cancer cell. So when people take tamoxifen or an aromatase inhibitor, another thing that you can also be doing is exercising and walking. And when we say walking, people say, how fast? And so what we say is we walk at a pace that allows us to not be able to talk to someone we're walking with. So that's, you know, one of the ways we put that. So I'm just going to join right here where this slide is and say, is there a recommended diet? Yes, and that's the plant-based diet. So people come to me asking about the Budwig diet. I had one woman who was trying to get her son with breast cancer. She was trying to get him to follow the Budwig diet by floating the cottage cheese in flaxseed oil. Believe me, we've heard it all. I had one woman start treatment and she had cut out all animal products completely. She didn't necessarily effectively go to a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet or using tempeh or soy products. So what ended up happening is that she started off her treatment at a very good weight. Her weight dropped rapidly. She ended up dropping her albumin, which is a measure of protein stores in the main compartment of the body. And ultimately, the medical oncologist said, we're going to have to stop treatment until you can get your nutritional status back up again. So she actually harmed herself in the effort of doing what she thought was going to be the right survivorship diet. I've also had people, if you look at the word macrobiotic diet, measuring their carbohydrates, their proteins, and their fats down to the percentage point. Really, we want you to think about diet with regards to the balanced plate, which is the way the USDA is teaching all nutrition these days. And we're using that to teach healthy cancer eating for during treatment and survivorship. Next slide, please.
Ms. Bosworth, we're going to go back to the other view because Chris's computer is not cooperating.
Okay.
And so we're just getting to that part now.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience.
Yep, no worries.
And thank you everybody in the audience. We will get there.
So one of the slides or questions that I saw pop up was regarding caffeine. Caffeine is not a problem at all. I'm drinking my cup of coffee right here as we speak. And the only reason we wouldn't want people to be drinking a lot of coffee is not necessarily for the coffee itself, is because of the caffeine. So if you're in treatment, hydration is a really big and important thing. So it's one of those things that I feel like we don't think of it as the coffee being the problem. We just don't want you to be in treatment and be dehydrated. So for people who drink caffeine on a regular basis, if you're kind of calculating your fluid needs during treatment, and I'll explain what I mean by that, it's one of those things that if you have 3 cups of coffee in a day, you benefit from the fluid contained in 2 of them. So unless you're really obese, you can take your weight in pounds, divided by 2.2, and that's your weight in kilos. And that's the number of ounces of fluid you should have in a day. And coffee can contribute to that if you're a regular coffee drinker, because you're used to the caffeine. So caffeine is not a carcinogen. Coffee is actually an antioxidant, and it provides an excellent protection through the antioxidant nature of the actual coffee bean for pancreatic and colorectal cancer. So the studies are for 4 to 5 cups a day. I'm not urging anyone to do that, but there's really no concern at all.
Ms. Bosworth, it's Eileen jumping back in again. And so we think that the issue is that because you are in the driver's seat, if you will, could I just ask you to try to use the down arrow on your keyboard and see what happens?
I'm using it now.
Okay. Well, we're still trying.
Wait, can I?
So we're in this place where we're trying to figure out who is going to, who can have the ability to move the slides.
I can do exit full screen. Is this better?
I think that might be the better thing to do, if you can.
Okay.
I certainly don't have any ability to guide it. It really is between you and Chris. And Chris says that she's been trying to do a number of things on the slides. And for the audience, this is the first time we've tried to do a different way of handling the slides this time around. And so we are experiencing some technical issues here, and my apologies.
Julie, you should be able to just click on it like usual now in this view.
Okay, so I should use my down arrow?
Yes, please.
Just use your cursor to click on it.
Chris, if she uses her cursor, where is she clicking? That's why I was suggesting the down arrow.
If I'm clicking on my cursor and nothing is happening.
Okay, try again.
So Chris, you do realize that the view says it's to life screen, right?
No, I see the PowerPoint.
That is not what we are all seeing. We're seeing a view at the top that says you are viewing to life screen and that it's in full screen mode.
And it says on mine, you are controlling to life screen.
So no one sees the PowerPoint?
No.
I see the
we see one screen. Is there a recommended diet? That's the only slide that is showing on the view. And so Stacy L is saying to all, yes, we can. I don't know exactly what she is saying that she sees. And it may be different from my view. So Stacy says she sees the slide.
Okay, so I have the page up that says, hold on, physical activity. And now, is there a
Okay,
recommended diet?
nope. Yes, is there a recommended diet? That's what is showing up on my screen. And then
Okay.
someone's saying they have a black screen, but I don't know what's going on there either. Yeah, and so a couple of people are saying, oh, right, there's a physical activity. That might be back to where we are, where we started with. Now, Ms. Bosworth, can you advance from here? I think we're making progress. Although, Ms. Bosworth, it seems like
Can't
you're
do
clicking.
anything. No, I'm using the arrows. Okay,
We're back to full
Great.
screen again.
great. Okay, so can everyone see this next slide?
So what I see is the funnel slide with minerals,
Yes.
vitamins. Okay, there's
Yes,
a yes
that's what I'd
from
like.
perfect. Okay,
Okay, excellent. So
yay. Thank
I'll
you.
say next.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. And I'll go and I'll say next when I need the slide. So right now,
Click
I
on it.
love this. I love this slide because a lot of times people will say to me, well, I'm not a big fruits and vegetables person, so can I just take a vitamin supplement? We often think, people come to me with often, 12 to 15 different things that they've been taking. The only vitamin that we really need to be taking, because we live in the north of Atlanta, is we need to be taking vitamin D, and everyone should be taking it, men and women. Dana Farber is in the midst of a high dose vitamin D study, several actually. One, we know that breast cancer risk increases with vitamin D deficiency, and vitamin D has a very wide range, 30 to 100, if you've ever had your level drawn. My daughter was a distance runner. She still had a very low vitamin D. She had a vitamin D of 17 with a normal range of 30 to 100. And we tested simply because she had a stress fracture that wasn't healing. So this is the one vitamin everyone should be on. Everything else, we want you to get the nutrients like the funnel shows, where you're eating a mixed plate of food. The nutrients all go in to give you the best, to kind of foster that best survivorship action, because they interact together. Again, Michael Pollan, eat food, mostly plants, and not too much. So the color of the food that you eat indicates the nutrient. So for example, both tomatoes and watermelon have the nutrient lycopene, which is highly protective against prostate cancer. So we know that. And yet at the same time, we're not going to take a lycopene supplement. We want you to get it from the foods, because both of those foods are also excellent soluble fibers. So the beauty of food, if we think back to the way the things that used to go before we started intervening on everything as a human race, this is really the way things always had gone. Next slide, please. Great. So here's what the reality of the situation. We don't pull out food or activity. It all works together. Food, when done correctly, like the slide shows, impacts activity because it allows us to be as active and feel well. Activity impacts our weight control along with the food. And when we're at a good weight, we sleep well. When we sleep well, we have good emotional health, which leads us back to being able to make good decisions with regards to the food in our lives. This says it all right here. So just because you've had breast cancer, you're a survivor, you're in the midst of your fight, you have metastatic disease and your fight is ongoing, the food still plays very much into what you can do and how you can control your future. But it does not stand alone. So we don't want any type of reactionary diets. You should never be on a diet. What you should be doing is eating just a healthy plant-based plan that relies on good choices, with instead of 50% of the plate being meats and proteins, the 50% of the plate being fruits and vegetables. Next slide, please. So food first is going to be the ongoing message today. 75% of Americans don't eat 5 fruits or vegetables a day. And I don't care if they're fruits or vegetables. The color indicates the nutrient. And therefore, I don't care how we're getting it. But I would like to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if you're on, if you were 6 years old, I would tell you to put a rainbow on your plate. And that would really kind of sum it up and be the end of the conversation. And I wouldn't need 45 slides to tell you. Americans eat about 1.5 servings of vegetables and less than a serving of fruit. A lot of times people would think the opposite because we gravitate towards sweetness. It's actually the opposite of that. If you're in treatment, you're going to notice that fruits and vegetables. A study shows that 69% of fruits and vegetables taste the way they're supposed to people in treatment, especially platinum-based treatments or Taxol, where you get a lot of taste discrepancy. So when those situations occur, I say to people, put the fruits and vegetables back in your diet. They'll set the tone for good eating, health-wise, good bowel control and bowel movement, as well as give you a step on survivorship. So unfortunately, we throw away more than 11 billion pounds of fruits and vegetables a year, yet people reach for dietary supplements totaling over $18 billion a year. And that's probably 2 to 3 years old. And we don't even know if we take a standalone vitamin C in synthetic form, like as a supplement of 100 to 200 to 300% of the RDA. We don't even know if that's effective. People often will say to me, I take a turmeric capsule every day, 500 milligrams. Is that enough? And I'll say, I don't know. I don't really know. I know turmeric is an excellent spice. I know it's part of in the Indian population quite a bit, and that Indian people living in India or following that type of diet have a very low. However, in the supplemental form, we don't know. So food first is the message. Next, please. Fruits and vegetables are naturally low in calories, as we all know, with the exception of avocado, which has 360 to 400 calories per avocado, and a lot of people don't know that, so I always try to say that. 65% of Americans are overweight or obese, meaning 120% ideal body weight. Yet only 6% of Americans would identify with that number because we're very used to being that size. If I look at what ideal body weight charts say people should weigh, people would be very surprised by how they look, myself included, if I weighed what that chart said. We used to, at the beginning of our breast cancer handout, say, please try to attain a BMI of here to here. And I'm not even going to say the numbers because people would be floored. We realized that that was a big turnoff. And people almost were like, well, great. I've been diagnosed. I've been through treatment. Now what? Now I don't fit this. And I haven't weighed this since 7th grade. Now what? What we try to say is get your BMI as close to a normal BMI as possible. 25 to 27 is a realistic number versus some of the numbers that we actually look at. The reason I say that is every BMI point is about 7 pounds. If you can think in increments of 7 pounds, this is more a feeling of being able to be accomplished. Fat cells can act as hormone pump and secrete hormones and other growth factors into the bloodstream. And that's point number 3 on this slide. And then if cells are overexposed to that, they tend to reproduce more quickly and increase cancer cell growth. Doesn't mean if you've started off overweight and have always been overweight that you're doomed. Absolutely not. Any improvement you can make, 5 to 7 pounds, any BMI point that's dropping is positive. The biggest thing that we don't want to have happen is we don't want you to gain weight after diagnosis. So a lot of times people will say, oh, I had a really bad year last year. And a lot of people will say this to me because of the pandemic, and I gained 30 pounds. We need to start thinking about reversing that pandemic weight gain and getting people back to where they normally were, and then not having them regain again. So the big message in this is the yo-yo dieting that is so prevalent in the American culture is really not a great thing because the body is registering that fat production. And that's especially in an estrogen receptor positive responsive cancer. Next slide, please. So movement is critical. I've said this several times already. Here it says 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise. I like the 30 minutes 5 times a week. I was just talking to one of the Farber dietitians yesterday, and we say, how do we phrase that? And that really is the sum of what we're talking about. And that's written right on the cancer survivorship updated packet that also addresses the vitamin D. Next, please. So this is really what we're looking at. Fruits and vegetables creating a protective effect, fruits and vegetables creating and exerting a protective effect over cells. And you can see a bunch of different things there. I'm looking at root vegetables. So eating seasonally is a big message here. Eating as fresh as possible or frozen, they're equal. And actually people will say to me, oh, I really don't have access to a lot. I don't really have access to a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables based on where I'm living, or I live alone and they go bad so quickly. Frozen are equally good, if not better, because the freezing at the site of picking preserves that nutrient value. So all of these things that you're seeing in this picture, if you look at them, we look closely at them, a lot of them are seasonal. Okay, so it doesn't have to be like the fresh salad that we get all summer. It can be these things that go into, and sometimes people will get those like a farm box or one of those clubs, and now it's escaping me. But one of the things that they'll do is so they can eat as fresh as possible. Next, please. So vitamins A, C, E, selenium, and other phytonutrients are considered antioxidants. So people say I'm taking it in pill form. And what these things do is, yes, they do work, but more so when we eat them with the foods. They prevent the damage to the cells and the attack of free radicals. So, what happens is this concept of free radicals is the hydrogen is pulled off of the bonds in the cell, and it makes the cells unstable, and it makes the cells susceptible to disease, cardiac disease. We're knowing that. So we want as much color and texture on the plate as possible. Next. Beyond vitamins, so phytonutrients are beyond vitamins, minerals, fiber, and they're the compounds found in plants that exert this profound disease preventive effects. Michael Pollan has a book called Food Rules, and it's this little paperback, and I tend to leave it around my house just, when my kids were younger, because I wanted to be like, who really wants me as their mother, telling them what to eat all the time. And I had breast cancer when my children were young, so I used it as a way to kind of talk about the importance of healthy eating. But when we talk about the plants, they're the immune system. These phytonutrients are the immune system in the plant, and they give it the protective effects and the color. So on the cover of Michael Pollan's book, he's got a celery stalk standing there. So he said one of his things is, eats foods that stand on one leg, like the celery stalk, a mushroom, or two, like a chicken or a turkey, versus 4. So I love that, because I'm like, okay, we know that things like beef and animal products like, pork and those types of things are going to fall down for further in the range in terms of health and frequency, that we should include them in our diet for both nutrition for survivorship, obesity, and cardiac disease. That's what I love about this diet. In a word, what we're talking about is a Mediterranean diet with lots of color and texture from plant-based sources. Next, please. So these are some examples of the words that are those phytonutrients. Okay, so, carotenoids, flavonoids, doesn't really matter if we're able to say them or pronounce them or know what they are. There are about 160 to 170 of these phytonutrients that occur naturally in foods and in nature. They occur in thousands of combinations in plants. And these are the things that are working together that you can't take from taking a vitamin. So other than that standalone vitamin D that we know our body can't convert by living in the north of Atlanta was the line where the doctor who I was listening to, he said, unless you're naked on your lawn with your arms exposed to the sun 15 minutes a day, you need to be on vitamin D. And he goes, so I hope that you're all on vitamin D, because I don't want to picture that. And we all had a chuckle, but it was a really lasting message. Everything else can be gotten right through the foods that we eat. Next, please. Here's an example of how they all work. I'm not going to take a test on this at the end, and I wouldn't expect you to see it do it either. But you'll see that these are all, this is the chemistry of the plant. And this is an exciting chart. I love the periodic table of the elements. I have one hanging in the office behind me. This is a phytochemical chart, and this says a lot about what we're trying to accomplish with the survivorship diet. Next, please. So how do they work? These phytonutrients stimulate enzymes that help the body to detoxify. So one thing is a big thing, like, and I'll see it on Facebook. Oh, I'm in the middle of a detox, a liver detox. The liver does that anyways. Think of it as a self-cleaning oven. That is the function of the liver. The liver sweeps toxins from the body and then it self-cleans itself. We don't need to do that. That is what happens. That's how the body works and how we're all alive today. So they can interfere. So one of the interesting things, some of these phytonutrients interfere with the growth and multiplication of cancer cells through a process called apoptosis. In other words, they kind of cause the cell to rupture, and therefore there's no further growth of the cell. They also decrease inflammation, and we know that cancer loves inflammation. Cancer goes right to inflammation. So if we know that we are having an inflammatory state in our body, one of the best ways that we can get away from that state is to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. So when we say a lot, 5 to 10 half-cup servings a day. So you might fill half your plate and there might be 4 right there. So people say, oh no, how can I possibly do that? It's really not a lot when we actually see that the serving is a half cup for everything except a piece of stone fruit like a peach or a plum, or a salad or melon. Everything else is a half cup serving. Those are all cup servings. Next, please. So they're working together in the synergistic effect. That's obviously somebody who's working with an orchestra to orchestrate a lovely, healthy, the orchestra is the symbol of the healthy synergistic lifestyle and synergistic benefit that we get out of the multitude of nutrients. Next, please. I already talked about this, and herbs and spices, the curcumin, the turmeric, and this is in the active dietary spice. People say to me, how do I use turmeric in my diet? It's an excellent spice. You don't have to love the taste of curry. It's not as strong as a curry, but I like to use it in salad dressings or in savory foods like salad sprinkled on a salad, or if you use something like an egg salad or a tuna salad, you can easily incorporate the turmeric into that. Also, people say to me, how much green tea do I need? I don't know. I really don't. We don't know that information. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's body is a different size compartment, but we do know that they have the green tea has the properties for inhibiting cancer cell growth and invasion. Occasionally, I do get somebody who says to me, I've spent my life drinking green tea. Why am I sitting here? That's the answer. That's the million-dollar question. So what is it that's led somebody to get cancer versus somebody else not? Really, the way it all boils down is there are so many factors that come into a diagnosis. It can be stress, it can be environment, it can be genetics. And interestingly, I gave a talk with a director of our breast care center at South Shore Satellite when I was working at the South Shore Satellite before I moved to the main campus at Dana Farber. And one of the things that she said to me is that everyone thinks there's going to be a genetic component of most breast cancers. It's really 10% or less. So it is a lifestyle opportunity for all of us. And there is that unfortunate situation when people follow the guidelines and it happens anyways. But I'd like to think that we're still a healthier body to receive treatment at that point. Next slide, please. These are just more examples of more of this. So people often will take resveratrol. It's great for energy. It's neuroprotective. But you don't need to take it as a supplement because you can get it in peanuts, berries, and grapes. So one of the attachments that I sent for Eileen to share with all of you through email is 11 foods to include in your life. And you're going to notice that greens and berries are right up there at the top of the list. Berries are some of the best, healthiest foods. We know, we always hear about blueberries, strawberries, but really any berry contains that resveratrol, and that's an excellent phytonutrient. Next slide. So we've covered this. I'm going to go over, you can go to the next slide. So here's that's a visual. I wish I could find a more updated picture, but this girl is eating obviously a strawberry, and she's covered in the beautiful phytonutrient. So if it stains your shirt, it's definitely biomedically active. So the greater depth of color is really an indicator. And I want to point out that when people say, people in the Boston area are really into white potatoes. I'm from Buffalo. It was something that was very apparent to me when I started doing food recalls when I moved to the Boston area to do my internship. I would have to say that if you think about things that provide very little nutrient value in our lives, whether they're phytonutrient or even just beneficial forms of carbohydrate, banana is an example of that. White bread, white crackers, white rice, and white potato. One of my friends who did the same nutrition program that I did at Cornell and is now a physician out in Colorado, she tells her middle-aged women to avoid all of those foods, that there's just no place for them in their lives. They promote weight gain because of a bump in blood sugar, a laying down of fat in the midsection, which is that really unhealthy fat. And she says, and what color are you really getting it from them? And I thought, wow, she's got a really good point there. So I share that point because this isn't just something that we as a cancer dietitian feel. This is what physicians are trying to explain to people. And if you really think about it, the more color, that rainbow that I referred to, is going to be how we're doing preventive and survivorship nutrition. Next slide, please. So I love this. This is how we teach nutrition. You have a copy of this in the packet of information that I sent to be shared with all of you. There's the breakfast, that's the breakfast balance plate, and the lunch and dinner balance plate. Your body doesn't know what time, so lunch and dinner we always combine together. If you look at, there's this basically the same size portion of protein as there is starch or whole grain. So you'll notice that the whole grains are on there. So for example, and I try to explain this, and if I were standing in front of you like we did prior to COVID, I would be holding up a plate, and I would be taking food models and showing you that you can't have the hamburger roll or the turkey burger roll or the chicken sandwich roll and also have peas, corn, pasta salad, because all of that would be then piled on that same portion of the plate. So these plates naturally keep the calories low. There's no need to go on a diet. The concept of a calorically restrictive diet doesn't exist. This is an automatically keeping the lower carb. So back in the 90s, we were eating 60 to 70% carb. We were in that really low fat phase. We now know that that is not the way to do nutrition for any age group, especially middle-aged women where breast cancer is most prevalent as we get older. So we now know that about a 40% carbohydrate diet that includes the best forms of carbohydrate is the best way to go. Next slide, please. We already talked about this. We can move right on. How to get it all in? People say to me, Julie, that's a lot to get in. So trying to eat at least 2 colorful plant foods before noon. I find people do better if they try to get in 4. And the best way to go about doing that is starting off the day with a smoothie. And you could say, but I want to eat my calories. I don't want to drink them. I totally agree with that. So I've switched to a smoothie bowl where I make the smoothie slightly thicker by adding less liquid component to it. It holds up in a bowl. And then I toast oats, rolled oats, not steel cut, because they obviously, you could break a tooth. So you toast oats with a little bit of olive or canola oil to crisp them up, along with some nut, and then sprinkle those over the top of the smoothie bowl with a drizzle of honey. So that's a great way, 4 right off the bat. You can usually get in a cup of spinach, baby spinach, without anyone even knowing it's there, and then a mix of other fruits and vegetables. I find a great version of it is usually raspberries, blueberries, and either something like a mango or a peach. And I buy all of mine organic at Trader Joe's for a very reasonable price. And then keeping fruits and veggies cut up. Sometimes people say, oh, by midweek, I'm not doing that. So those all will hold up really beautifully. Cut them all up on a Sunday afternoon while you've got the football game on, put them in a snap top container, and then you can pull them out all week long. Next slide, please. I want to talk, just really go right straight to it. Sugar does not feed cancer. I had a woman yesterday, a very aggressive cancer. She presented to the Farber, actually from Buffalo. She was at Roswell Park in Buffalo, decided she wasn't comfortable there, and decided to come to the Farber for her treatment. So we were sitting and talking. She had already lost about 18 pounds. She was down to the low 103, 105 range for her height of 5'6". She was very, very thin. She was also very weak. It had nothing to do with her cancer. It had everything to do with her eliminating carbohydrate from her diet, basically on almost like an Atkins or ketogenic diet. We don't promote any of those. People do that saying, well, I'm trying to reduce sugar in my life in general. I say you still need whole grain products as well as fruits and vegetables, all of which fall into the carbohydrate area or arena. All carbohydrate breaks down to sugar for use as energy by the body. That is the front part of every blood sugar curve, and we need that. There's no way to avoid it. If you look at the blood sugar curve that I believe I sent Eileen, it's going to show you that at the front of every curve is caused by a bump in blood sugar, which is how we actually nourish our brains and our physical state. There is no need for elimination of any kind of carbohydrate. The Farber has a position statement. I wrote, we have also the Cancer Nutrition Consortium. You can Google that, and it's got a great statement about sugar. This is one of the most frustrating things that we fight, is because if we were to eliminate sugar, we're also negating everything that I just said leading up to this point in this conversation. Chronic excess intake of simple sugar leads to a production of hormones like insulin. Insulin is needed for the energy in the body. It impacts all cellular growth, not just cancer cell growth. We can't siphon the cancer cell out from the healthy cell. That's the bottom line. All cells are fed, but the cells to rebuild red and white blood cells need the energy and the calories, so that if you're in treatment currently, people say, how do I get my red and white blood cells to come up? And I'll say, in the presence of adequate calories, which comes from not dieting, adequate protein builds those cells back up and keeps you on schedule for your chemotherapy treatment. Next, please. Yes, excess insulin can promote tumor growth. So do I want you to have a hot fudge sundae at every meal? Absolutely not. No one would ever suggest that, and we would be gaining excessive amounts of weight if that was the case. Sugar is broken down, starts with salivary amylase in the mouth. That starts a salivary cascade, and that's the whole digestion of carbohydrates, and it completes in the stomach, and then is secreted into the bloodstream right at the site of the pancreas where insulin is secreted, unless you're a diabetic. That's a very necessary process in digestion. We don't want to eliminate that. So behaviors that reduce insulin levels while still allowing you to eat correctly is physical activity, weight loss in general if you're obese, and unrefined carbs. So yes, thinking back to the very first slide that I presented, that's not the lifestyle we want. We want natural foods. We want to be eating not organic necessarily, because that's expensive, but foods that are colorful like the rainbow. Next slide, please. Here's the blood sugar curve that I'm speaking of. The red line shows the consumption of refined or too much carb at meals and snacks. Okay. Right over on the right of that, foods that spike: chips, French fries. French fries are one of the worst foods you can possibly eat. They go directly into wildly rapid blood sugar swings. They are calorically dense, and as the fry cooks, it absorbs the oil around it, making them both very high in fat as well as very high in starch. And there's almost no nutrient value. Okay. The single one food that I would recommend people cut out of their lives, and I've said it to my husband, to my kids, to anyone who will listen to me, is French fries. Because if you look at that blood sugar curve over to the left, that number one curve that makes no one feel well can be promoted by any of those sugary items and not directly sugary, but a basic white potato. So number 2, the curve that we're trying to accomplish, that number 2 curve shows clear head, clear mind, because the body is enjoying the fact that the blood sugar is not flying all over the place. That curve is promoted by whole grains, legumes, and other pulses, which is a category that includes black beans, chickpeas, lentils, and flax. And those are digested farther down in the GI tract and represent more of a complex carb and a great source of protein. And it shows stable energy, longer periods of feeling full, better mood, alertness, and overall feeling much more energy, not just stable, but more energy. The big wide swings show that big sleepiness, sluggishness, irritability, poor food choices. So this is good, not just in a cancer arena or a survivorship arena. This is just good, healthy eating that's promoted by the plant-based diet. Next slide, please. So could you just move this down slightly so I can see the heading on the slide? So these are healthy fats. If we look at these, we want to reduce the consumption of saturated and trans fats. Saturated fats are found in animal products and butter. Do I want you to use margarine? Absolutely not. And there's really no need to go to, this is fine, thank you. There's no need to go to any of the, I can't believe it's not butter. Dietitians use butter, but a small amount. We reach for fats for the mouthfeel that they're providing, the texture, if you will. So a small amount of the real thing is a much better way to go calorically, because even if we have the healthy fat that doesn't have saturated fat in it, the calories remain the same, whether it's healthy or not. A tablespoon of fat is a tablespoon of fat, and it's 120 calories. So we want monounsaturates like olive oil, canola oil, which I have a little fun fact. Canola oil just means Canada-made oil, which is just so interesting to me because I'm thinking, what plant is canola oil from? It's not. It's from a plant, a building. Olives, avocado, nuts, nut butters. Those are all your healthy foods. Okay, those are the way to make your own healthy salad dressings. Avocado toast drizzled with a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of lemon juice or a cayenne pepper on a piece of whole grain toast. It doesn't get much better than that. Omega-3s, which are unique foods that are going to be cardiac protective and health protective, found in your fatty fishes. No need to take a fish oil tablet if you eat the 4 ounces of oily fish, or another way to get the omega-3s are walnut oil, avocado, and flax. So please notice what I'm trying to show you is that there are ways to get away from any of those supplements by just eating well. I want to say one thing about trans fats. Trans fats are doing the same type of thing by seeking that additional hydrogen. A trans fat means across. Trans means across from. So you have a wobbly molecule, saturated and saturated here correctly, and unsaturated on the 2 other ends. It's not a stable molecule. It robs the body of free radicals, which is exactly what antioxidants, like the colorful fruits and vegetables, are trying to prevent. So we want to help that out by completely eliminating processed foods from the diet, margarine, and partially hydrogenated oils. So you might see things on a food label, and it might say partially hydrogenated. You're looking at a trans fat that's being disguised under another topic. Next, please. So how do we want to start the day? Both of these have about 12 grams of sugar, but with the orange, we're getting fiber, significantly lower calories, and 170 phytonutrients working toward health. Okay? This kind of says it all. Next slide. So how do we do this? Now, this is really interesting to me. In our breast cancer shopping list that you're all receiving today, we say 4 ounces of red meat a week. The American Institute of Cancer Research for all cancers, including breast and colorectal, which respond to lifestyle changes best, says 18. That number kind of blows us all away, but that includes beef, pork, and lamb. And, there is no line or category. So all of the fish, meats, chicken, red meat are all on a continuum. A lot of people will say, well, I've just decided to be vegetarian. I say, that's fine. absolutely fine, but it's unnecessary if there are people who enjoy those types of food. We still think that this is a little bit excessive, okay? Will tell people, you're fine if you, including your lunches, because sometimes people say, well, when we make dinner, red meat can be found at lunch. So I'll say to people 3 to 4 ounces once to twice a week. So I serve red meat about every 10 days, much to the horror of my husband and my son. But my other kids don't eat red meat. So I find that's the best way to go. Also, I want to point out that bacon and sausage, those are not meats. Those are fats. So don't even say, so where does that fall in? It doesn't fall in because that's food that we really, smoked foods, those are foods that most people shouldn't be eating. And you'll see that as point number 3 on the slide. And if we're filling our plate with meat, we're eating less fruits and vegetables. So that's that kind of that flip of the plate that we talked about at the beginning. Next, please. So aim for half of your plate, preferably vegetables, at lunch and dinner, a quarter of the plate as lean protein, and a quarter of the plate as complex carb. And this is not the 10-inch plate that's available to you at Crate and Barrel, at Macy's, at Kohl's. It's hard to find an 8-inch plate. I went online, I was able to find a 9-inch plate on Amazon, and I ordered 12 of them. Because the plates that we're eating off of right now are basically 11 to 12 inches in diameter, or a large square plate. The plate will help you control the size. We say an 8 to 9-inch plate, not including the edge. So the eating surface, if filled once and distributed accordingly, can naturally control calories and assist with weight loss toward that lower BMI. Next, please. So this is what we're talking about. There's a wealth of whole grains out there. There are stores in our area, and I'm sure in yours, that will show you all of the different products. Rolled oats, flax, oat bran, quinoa, farro, and barley are delicious foods. They can be sprinkled over a salad. They can be used in place of a macaroni or a white rice, and they're so much healthier for you and promote that blue curve that we all looked at, that slow rise and fall, and promote healthy eating and a satisfied stomach and brain. Next, please. I mentioned earlier that there's no need to do organic. There's no benefit in terms of organic foods from an anti-cancer advantage, unless it's avoiding the foods that are going to be this laden with pesticides, or have thin skins, or foods that you can't wash well. So the dirty dozen, half of the dietary pesticide exposure comes from 12 foods, but there's no better nutrient content. People always tell me, well, I'm all organic, Julie. And they act like I'm going to be thrilled by that. And I say, you might actually be wasting a lot of money, because I'm not ever going to buy a piece of citrus fruit or a banana or a melon that's organic, because the skin on those is so thick. There's no way those pesticides are going to impact the part of that I'm actually eating. The bottom line, washing it with a little bit of agitation can do exactly what we need it to do. Then there are the dirty dozen that are included in your breast cancer wellness packet as the foods that, if you're going to buy organic and can afford to do so, are worth doing. Next, please. And there they are. The dirty dozen is buy these organics, and the clean 15 are those that are lowest in pesticide, and you do not need to bother getting them organically. So I think that just says, and the interesting thing to me is we want organic potatoes, but we don't care about sweet potatoes because of the way they're grown and the thickness of the skin. Next, please. On that slide, I just want to credit the Environmental Working Group. I actually have that app on my phone. And so a lot of times if I'm thinking to myself, I'm really wondering, the Environmental Working Group app is a good one to have. So we've already talked about the fact that where we live, we can't convert vitamin D2 to vitamin D3. We know that we've seen increasing levels. We're all slathering ourselves with sunscreen. We know that. So we need to actually have that be prevalent. And we want to make sure we take it. And people say, how much is necessary? 1,000 international units of D3 is safe. The studies that we have going on at Dana Farber are 4,000, but I would not suggest going over 3,000 international units without being under a doctor's supervision, because it is a fat soluble vitamin and toxicities can be seen in the liver if you go over the 3,000. So I personally take 2. I'm pretty fair skinned and I'm not outside as much, or I have suntan lotion on if I am. And I also want to explain one thing. People say, why didn't we hear about this? Well, first of all, we didn't know about it. And secondly, cod liver oil is one of the best forms of vitamin D that you can get, with 1,340 international units. The previous generations took that in the morning. People would be like, oh, I start my day with a tablespoon of cod liver oil. That was prevalent and now has become not prevalent. So we need to take it as a capsule or a gel, because that's what's happened, is we've lost that in our diets. Next, please. People ask me about alcohol. Alcohol should be limited to 1 drink per day for women and 2 for men. And the serving is 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, and 1.5 ounces of spirits. So people always ask me, and I'm sure maybe one of you's thinking this right now, they will say to me, so can I save up and not drink all week and have a bottle at a party? The answer is unfortunately no, because it's dosage based. Okay. So the way my medical oncologist said to me is, don't get in the habit of having an open bottle just sitting on your counter waiting to be drunk. People will say, well, I enjoy a drink and the drink helps my stress. I understand what you're saying as well. I think moderation is really the key word here. Okay. If you feel like you're struggling with this concept, you can Google it. You can look at aicr.org. It will give you the guidelines and reasons. And the word inflammation is exactly what we're talking about. Alcohol in general is an inflammatory, and cancer loves inflammation. Next slide, please. So this is really where we're headed. This is the Mediterranean diet. It's at its very best. Nuts, whole grains, flaxseed, chickpeas, and a wealth of color. Next, please. Here are some resources. These are that's the Dana Farber website, danafarber.org/nutrition. We also have an app called Ask the Nutritionist, and it's a really great way to have all of these types of questions answered. The other, right below Dana Farber, is Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. We do a lot with them at Dana Farber. I attended an entire workshop on hyperglycemia, meaning an elevated blood sugar in stage 3 and 4 cancers, and how that impacts outcome. And we know that if you're diabetic, you really want to make sure that your blood sugars are controlled, because talk about sugar feeding cancer. That's an example that we know that a poorly controlled blood sugar or a poorly controlled A1C feeds into that whole mechanism. That's where the sugar feeds cancer steps outside of that. But I want to just make that statement to say that that's a separate situation. And I'm hoping that your takeaway message is not any from today's conversation, is really not any kind of specific diet, but that it's a plant-based look, a Mediterranean-based diet. And I included recipes and a look at what that looks like, that fosters good health, that avoids obesity, chronic cardiac disease, and cancer. I'm happy to take as many questions as people want at this point. I have nothing this morning, and I plan to stay on as long as people want to talk. And I'm very happy to address anything personally if you have questions you feel you'd rather not ask. And I can provide my email at the end, or even right now in case people need to go. So my personal email for Dana Farber is J, the letter J, Bosworth, my name, the number 1 @partners.org. J Bosworth with an S, 1 @partners.org. The 1 is important, or it will go to a physical therapist at Mass General who specializes in shoulder work. So I just wanted to say that, because she'll occasionally be like, hi, I think this was meant for you.
All right, that's very funny. It's Eileen coming back on. And so I think we have a number of questions that
Great.
have started to come through the chat, and I already see that there's another one started. So let's get right to it. That
Great.
was so informative. I want to bring to everyone's attention that a link to all the handouts. So Ms. Bosworth gave us all of the handouts as individual files. We put them together so it would be easy for you all to access information. People are asking for some of the concepts that you presented in your slides, and you've given us a whole lot of meaty information. I know that everyone will agree once they see the slides and the handouts that much of what you have communicated, including the breast cancer shopping list and some other pieces on the Mediterranean diet and so forth. And so in the chat, you'll find the instructions, because we literally cannot email them because it's too much of a file and you're having trouble getting them to us. So they're in a link embedded on the nutrition page on the 2Life website, that's right there. You don't need any special access. And so with that, let's get to it. Now, you talk about caffeine, but one of the early questions that came in, and I don't remember hearing you say anything about tea specifically. Can you talk about that?
So, people say to me, oh, well, what's going on with tea in terms of caffeine content? People can make a weak coffee or a super strong tea. So tea and coffee are both viewed as antioxidants. We always hear about green tea for the unique antioxidant benefits. But, all tea is going to have an antioxidant benefit to it, green just being even more so. But the caffeine content of green tea can be quite high based on how someone steeps it. I happen to like really strong coffee and really strong tea. So I often will just leave the tea bag in. So caffeine in general is not an issue with regards to cancer or really any chronic disease. Some people who have been told by their cardiologist not to have a lot of caffeine, might want to go to a weaker source, but, not go over the top with quantity or number. But tea is an absolutely fine product and can be viewed in the antioxidant category that would fall under a phytonutrient because it's based on leaves. So tea and coffee are both phytonutrients, if you will, as well as antioxidants.
Perfect, thank you. There are several questions that have come in about dairy, and I'll start with eggs first. And if you can talk about dairy in terms of in general, and then there's a specific question about yogurt and or milk. Okay,
so dairy is one of the biggest questions that we get. And if you look at the breast cancer shopping list, you're going to see that there's dairy all through that. And there's no limitation on it. And we used to be very concerned about high fat dairy products. And we now know that the fat content of dairy products actually assist in the absorption of fat soluble vitamins, such as vitamin D, and that actually they're not nearly as restricted along with eggs that we had once thought. So it's always hard. Nutrition is not a perfect science, and we always learn more, but we really promote, whether it's AICR.org, either of the two Cancer Center websites, for example, the Memorial Sloan Kettering or the Dana Farber, they're all going to say that there's absolutely no problem with dairy. One of my favorite publications, and you might want to spend the $8 and get it, is called the Nutrition Action Health Letter. It's a beautiful little pamphlet. I'll grab one as we speak. It's a little pamphlet, comes once a month. It's 15 pages long. Yes, it's got all sorts of charts in it. It goes right, and it's by the Center for Science in the Public Interest. They have a food fail and a food find each month, or food porn, they call it sometimes, and then a healthy recipe. They've got a featured article. And the one most recently, the Nutrition Action Health Letter, one of the dietitians sent it to all of us in our group chat at the Farber. And she said, hallelujah, they've addressed cancer and dairy, because there is absolutely no clinical benefit to eliminating dairy from the diet. And in fact, people who had yogurt and cottage cheese had a 10% lower risk of recurrence in eating that. So we know that, first of all, yogurt is an excellent product. It's a great way to have no meat and get a good protein intake. Greek yogurt especially is high, along with cottage cheese, 15 grams per 4 ounces of protein. And it's great in terms of the bacterial translocation of the diet and having a probiotic in your diet that's not a pill-based. And it's called the Nutrition Action Health Letter. And it's the Center for Science in the Public Interest. It's got it's got a whole medical staff, and what it does is it helps get rid of all of the myths and I love the articles.
That is a great answer. And I think we've addressed there were 2 or 3 other questions that came in. And I think the eggs and all of that, we've got a better handle on. So
we used to say 3 to 4 yolks a week, and we're really not concerned. And we know, keep in mind, everybody, that only 40% of your total cholesterol level is based on what you're eating. The rest is cholesterol made by the liver. And it's one of those things that it's so genetically based. And also total cholesterol level is not really what we all look at any longer. We look at total cardiac risk, which is the total level divided by the HDL. And that should give you a number in the low, a low number. A number of 5 or less is what we're looking at. Okay, so take your total level and divide it by HDL. If these numbers in terms of the dairy products, if you're like, well, I can't do that, you might find even if you have a high cholesterol, you can still do that.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move into a couple of other areas. What about Dr. Gundry, who says the skin and seeds of a tomato are bad?
So I'm not honestly sure where, other than Dr. Gundry is honestly the only person who I've ever seen even bring up parsing that out. You could certainly poach a tomato or blanch it and have the skin fall off of it. You could take the seeds out, especially in a plum tomato, and just eat the beneficial portion, like the meat of it, as we call it. But Dr. Gundry has a lot of ideas that do not have any evidence based outside a lab. So what happens with something like that, and what we get with a lot of holistic nutritionists, like we have a man in the Boston area named Mark Mancola. I don't ever want to slander someone, but when somebody is making statements that are only based on lab findings that are not done in people, we can't embrace that as evidence-based science. So everything that we provide to patients at Dana Farber on our website is evidence-based studies that are done on people. I also struggle in general with holistic practitioners of either medicine or nutrition, who in telling people what to do or what not to do allows them to sell a product, because then they have a secondary interest in making that recommendation. So when we talk at Dana Farber, we're not selling anything. We're not promoting any label of, people will always say to me, oh, well, I've gone to a health food store and I've bought the best organic vitamin that I can possibly buy. And they'll tell me some ridiculous price. Some of the best vitamins, for example, are nature-made vitamins. They do the best in human studies, and they're about $10 or less for a standard supply of them. So I just want to be very careful with any kind of people who are making a claim of elimination based on anything but human, well-advanced tertiary level human studies. It's called evidence-based nutrition.
Perfect. What is cytochrome P450 recurcumin quotient? And I'll acknowledge that I am not familiar with this terminology.
So that's that one slide that I had up. Cytochrome P50 is the curcumin. The curcumin can interrupt that. It's a biochemical pathway. That's a biochemical pathway that curcumin, or in other words, turmeric, because turmeric is a component of curcumin, which is basically curry, like a curry. It falls into that whole category. That cytochrome production pathway is an interrupted pathway that's based on, and that's what we know that these phytonutrients do. They cause apoptosis, or the interruption of a biochemical pathway in a very natural way through normal foods that are processed through the body. So that was just being used as an example of some of the pathways that are either promoted or cut down by phytonutrients. So whether it's a promoted pathway that allows us better health, like through vitamin D, or whether or not it's so that, vitamin D would be a beneficial versus something like the apoptosis caused by some of the things in terms of cancer cell growth. Because cancer cell growth goes like this, and all of a sudden it takes off. So if we can truncate that pathway early on, it cuts out that whole way the tumors produce and grow.
Excellent answer. Next question. Is there any advice for eating for a genetic situation, such as in particular for mutations like CHEK2?
Okay. And that's the beauty of this. There's no specific things that we've learned in the last probably 10 years. We've learned so much about genetic mutations. And when we do a genetic panel, it used to be for 11 to 13 different mutations. Now with the use of immunotherapies, that for all of the different types of cancers that are out there, and those new drugs that, like, literally since September, I'd like to say there are 4 or 5 new drugs that we're constantly learning of. We're not changing our recommendations specific to the mutation. And that's the beauty of this diet, is that eating a varied color diet, I would never tell someone to eat only red or only along the red, oranges and yellows. That's why the beauty of this is that we want rainbow, as many different colors as possible and as much variety as we can find. And that's where the use of frozen foods can be so helpful, because it allows us to get them, even if they're not common in our area, or it's not a common time of year, with the preservation of the nutrient content. So as we're learning about these different mutations, especially with this numerous breast mutations at this point, we're not changing our recommendations overall. We're just further enhancing the plant-based diet.
Do you have any and that I think leads into this next question, which is about eating for diabetes and for a cancer patient that is also facing type 1 diabetes.
Mm-hmm. So the beauty of type 1 diabetes and the cancer diet is that they both, the plant-based diet in general, the distribution of nutrients very much plays into what we would do in terms of the way we teach for type 1 diabetes at this point in the way we teach nutrition for diabetics. So if you think about a type 1 diabetic, having a certain number of, carbohydrate counting is how we do it, and how that ultimately affects the blood sugar spike. All of the foods that were recommended in terms of whole grains, as well as non-starchy plant sources, all are perfect for a diabetic, because it's that Mediterranean plant-based eating that, whether it's a type 1 diabetic or a type 2 diabetic, that all fits right into that. And that's what I really like about teaching the plant-based diet, especially when you think about non-starchy fruits and vegetables fall on one side, which is excellent for either type of diabetes in terms of blood sugar control, as well as, type 1 diabetics have a higher risk for cardiovascular disease. It plays right into keeping that component of it all down low. And then if we say all you need to do is balance between a healthy protein and a complex carbohydrate, it all fits in really beautifully. So if you are a type 1 diabetic or even a type 2, one of the best things to do is have a really good handle on what your A1C is every 3 to 4 months. And that way you know how your current eating and the number of, and I would go ahead and calculate 40% of total calories in the form of complex carbohydrate, in other words, carbohydrate choices. And if there's somebody who has a question on how to do that, they could email me with their height and weight, and I would be happy to help them calculate that.
Thank you. So I'm going to the next question. Yes. And so let's see, my question would be that healthy foods are often quite expensive for many, and how to reduce the price of some healthy foods, vegetables, whole wheat bread, etc., so that everyone can afford healthy foods. I think you addressed some of this by giving us the organic versus not organic, because obviously there's a premium for that there, but are there any other thoughts you have?
Yeah, so people automatically, there's going to be a category within everything. So first I would go to the organics versus not, and become very familiar with where money is being wasted. Also remembering that a half cup portion is pretty quickly satisfied. Like if you look at a portion size in terms of the half cup, and you're hearing me say 5 to 10 servings, you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's going to be super expensive. But at the end of the day, when you really think about it, it adds up pretty quickly. I love the use of the frozen, like I mentioned, and it doesn't need to be bird's eye. It doesn't need to be the high level frozen. It's not going to be the indicator. So a good store brand of a frozen fruit or vegetable used in a smoothie can be a way to get it. And I agree, it's expensive. It's extremely frustrating, especially if people are on subsidized meal plans, food stamps, any of those. It's a really, really challenging conversation to have with people. And the one thing that I can say for it is, just because people are paying more for it doesn't mean it's that much better. So you can get a good whole grain bread, not whole wheat. Take it a step further and get a whole grain bread. Arnold is a really great whole grain bread, not Pepperidge Farm, interestingly. Pepperidge Farm doesn't have nearly the, Pepperidge Farm creates that kind of image of, oh, I'm eating it is not nearly as good as Arnold bread. Okay, so Arnold's a great brand. It's pretty well known. It's pretty easily attainable. Also, Panera has now come out with a very good set of whole grain breads that are in the $3 range for a decent sized loaf of bread. And I would advise anybody, as well as Trader Joe's, and I would advise refrigerate these items, because if there is whole grain, protein content will be higher and they will be more likely to get moldy quickly. So pop those right in the refrigerator. Store as many things as possible in the refrigerator, tomatoes kind of being that exception. Big tomatoes will go soft more quickly and become moldy more quickly. I have a little colander on the counter of cherry tomatoes. They last much longer than a big tomato, and they can sit at room temperature because that's where we would, but otherwise I would go to cold storage with as many things as possible. And I would use as many portions of the fruit or vegetable as possible. Like, don't throw out your peels and that kind of thing, because that's where it's going to be, you're going to be wasting the best and most nutritious portion.
We're going to go back to meat for a second. This is from a person, her brother is battling cancer and he's a hunter. And so venison, can you talk about any health? Does that fall into the same category as other meats, or is it considered different?
So the beauty of the fact that he's a hunter is that he's getting really fresh. Venison, first of all, has a lot less fat content than regular beef. So if you think about bison, venison, those, and now you can even buy those in small portions in a food store, but those are healthier red meats. The reason our red meat, we've also gotten away from recommending red meat, is because the animals are not raised in a manner that allows them to grow slowly and therefore to have a nutrient value in their meat. So one of the most appalling things that we're learning is by the way animals are stored. And if someone is a hunter, a venison, a deer hunter, those nutrients in that meat are much more prevalent than if we randomly took a cow that was in a small contained area and used that meat. So hopefully what you can think about is that venison is actually a nutrient dense meat that is low in fat. And also keep in mind, the type of cancer that your brother has is going to be, I would be less concerned about his red meat intake, or anyone's for that matter. We talked about it heavily today because breast is a glandular cancer and responds to less red meat. It's a positive to have less red meat or pork in breast cancer, colorectal, and prostate. But if he's not fighting, like if he has lung cancer, that red meat issue is much less than it would be if he were fighting one of the other types of the cancer.
And actually, that comes to the end of the questions that I have seen all together. There
Okay.
have been some early questions. I was reading back through one that talked about the quantity of dairy, and I think you addressed that very nicely in the piece on dairy.
And women need
yes.
women need about 3 servings a day of dairy.
Okay.
To get their calcium in. So women in the typical breast cancer age group need 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium in a day to work with the vitamin D for most effectiveness. That is usually achieved through 3 dairy sources. So I drink 3 cups of coffee with milk in it. I'll often have cheese or yogurt. There's my 3. I used to drink a large quantity of milk at dinner. I stopped doing that because calorie-wise, that's a lot of milk. That's a lot. And it's kind of like a diminishing return at that point. It's just a lot where I might just want water or something instead. A lot of times people eat instead of drinking, and we might just need hydration instead. And I was more using it as a hydration source. But 3 sources of dairy. I didn't say the actual quantity when people say, so we know that we need at least 3 in this typical age group for a breast cancer diagnosis.
Excellent.
I
Well,
did have
everyone,
I'm so sorry.
on.
I didn't put it in the chat, Julie, but I did want to ask a question really quick. I know that you spoke on frozen fruits, and you know they basically have the equal benefits as fresh
Yes.
fruit. What are your recommendations on canned fruits and vegetables? That's something I didn't hear you address.
So, sometimes people will use a canned fruit or vegetable if they're getting the side effect of diarrhea from some of the immune therapies, like canned pears, canned peaches, applesauce, those kinds of things still will give you the soluble fiber benefit to bind the fluid that would be caused by immune therapy. But we know that really a lot of canned fruits and vegetables have completely lost their nutrient content. So I don't refer to canned as often because we know that you might be able to get, like I'm thinking of a bag of broccoli, for example, is maybe $1.99, $1.69, depending on where you live, to have a frozen bag of that. A can of peas is going to be 99 cents. It's not even, corn and peas are not even considered a vegetable because they're starches, and they're one of the most frequently reached for items in terms of canning. So we really try to steer people away from the canned because most prevalently they go for the ones that aren't even considered a vegetable, but more so because the nutrient content has been leached out of it into the water. Most people do not drink the water surrounding their vegetables.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great responses. And you know what? We're 10:30. We've gone a very good amount of time. Your presentation was absolutely informative, and many people are asking for additional information. I have put in instructions just to access that the handouts. If you haven't been able to do that, I will resend that and get information related to giving some feedback and so forth that we can, that I'll get out to everyone who participated today, and actually everybody who had the information. We have recorded this session and we'll make it available on our YouTube page just as soon as we can get that pulled together. And so this was absolutely fabulous. It was well worthwhile. And I think everyone learned a lot of both things they can use right this moment, as well as addressing the concepts that can help us all be as healthy as we possibly can. And I think that's what you're getting to. The passion you have around nutrition is completely evident. And I think some of the resources you've given, and I typed in the publication, that was one of the questions that did come in. And so that's in there for people to sign up. Your email, someone was kind enough to put your email address.
Thank you, I saw that.
People
got
that. Actually, our founder, Mary Ginsburg, is on as an attendee today, and she put a story in about when she was going through her own cancer treatment, and her son talked about eating broccoli. And so you might have seen that in there. And he wasn't all that excited about broccoli. And today he's a vegan. So, you know, or vegetarian, I should say. I think I misstated that. So we all evolve. And Jamila, of course, thank you for being on, Jamila. And she is our support services program manager. But we had a great group today. And we had a lot of attendance. We had a few people starting to drop off. So at 10:30, we're going to close it off and say thank you for your time. Thank you for your wonderful, wonderful work, and be well. And thank you again for the slides. We're going to get that back out again to everyone. So with that, I will say our next presentation, our fourth and final in the Women's Health Conference series, will take place on January 13th. And if you are, and many people who are on today have signed up for that fourth and in the series as well. But we'll send out reminders and so forth if anyone has not put it on their calendar yet. And we look forward to seeing all of you, hearing from all of you in the days and weeks to come. So happy holiday season, happy new year, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.